Thanks. Thanks to Foreign Policy for America. I've been connected with you since you began. Earlier today, I used some words of Pope Francis's to comfort a colleague. And Pope Francis said something very powerful one year. He went to an island in the middle of the Mediterranean that had been a place of refuge for refugees coming across from Africa to Europe. And he called on all of us, to be una isla de Mercedes en el medio de un mar de indiferencia. Be an island of mercy in the middle of a sea of indifference. It was interesting. It was interesting the way he phrased that. If you think about what the antonym to mercy is, what the opposite of mercy is, you might not say indifference. You might say hatred or opprobrium. You'd come up with some negative word. But Pope Francis said, what we need is to be islands of mercy in the middle of a sea of indifference. And I view Foreign Policy for America's mission as trying to create that. We are living in a sea of indifference. And if there was ever a time to be that island of mercy, it's now. I am obsessed with not going to war except doing it the right way. And I want to tell you why. When I was governor of Virginia from 2006 to 2010, I ran to be governor talking about early childhood education and the things that candidates talk about. But I had a job as governor that all 50 governors have, but that we never talk about in campaigns, and that generally isn't that important part of the work of a governor. And that job is Commander-in-Chief of the Virginia National Guard. But during the years that I was governor, during the single term that I got, 2006 to 2010, me and every other governor in this country, during the surge of wars in the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan, we were going to too many funerals, and we were going to too many wakes, and we were writing too many condolence letters in our offices late at night, and we were going to deployments, and then we were going to homecomings, hoping that the group of our guardsmen and women getting off the bus would be all present and accounted for. And too many times, the leader could not offer those words. And so I decided when I ran for the Senate that if I did nothing else in the Senate, I would do everything I could to make sure that we didn't take our sons and daughters into war, asking them to risk their lives, unless we did the hard work as the Article I branch to decide that the war was in the national interest. And right before I became a senator, my oldest son became a Marine infantry commander. So that took that obsession and even torqued it up more dramatically. Some of you in the room I've already talked to know my son Nat. And I've held that same standard. I remember looking President Obama in the eye when he said, Bashar al-Assad's use of chemical weapons against civilians is something that demands a response, which it did, and that response should be military, which I would have supported it. But I said to the president, but you can't do it without Congress. And I said the same thing to President Trump in his first term, and I said the same thing to President Biden during his term. You cannot take this nation to war and force our kids to risk their lives if you don't have the kind of debate about what the stakes are and ask people to put their name on it. There shouldn't be a shortcut. And so Todd Young and I were partnered to take this zombie authorization that was sitting on the books that presidents were using long after the Iraq War was over to justify military action, and we worked to repeal it. But I'll just conclude and say this. I'm on a bigger mission now. My mission now is to stop a war. I'm not a pacifist. I'm a just cause, just war believer. The theology of my church says there are circumstances where the strong cannot stand by and allow the weak to be kicked around. And so there are causes that are just and that even justify saying to our own children, you've signed up for a mission. This mission may cost you your life, but it is a mission that's in the national interest. Where we are right now in Iran is not that. I mean, if you listen to the debate, things that the president and others say about this war with Iran, they always say Iran's been a problem for the United States since 1979, and I hear that again and again and again. And I just have to get this off my chest, because if you hear this, you should say the following. The United States and Iran were friends. We were friends. The Tehran Conference in World War II, 1943, FDR, Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin met in Tehran and guaranteed Iran their sovereignty and their independence and their borders. And the Iranian people loved us. What went wrong? What went wrong? What went wrong is the United States made the decision in 1953 to topple the Iranian democratically elected government and to install a dictator, the Shah of Iran, over the Iranian people. And that Shah, with a U.S.-trained secret police force, terrorized Iranians. By the thousands, Iranians were killed and imprisoned and tortured and exiled. And when the Iranian people finally decided to throw off that dictatorship in 1979, after 26 years of suffering, they didn't like the United States. They didn't like the United States. And so they took over our embassy, violating all international law. And then we funded Iraq in a civil war, in a war against Iran that cost hundreds of thousands of Iranian civilian lives. And so then they funded terrorists to bomb our embassy in Beirut and the Marine barracks. And then we shot down an Iranian commercial airliner in 1989, killing 290 civilians, and didn't admit it for years. And then we toppled the governments of their two next-door neighbors and put our troops all around them, and then they've been attacking our troops nonstop. None of this is to say that the Iranian regime has anything to say real positive about it. They are brutal to their own people, they are brutal to their neighbors, and they engage in all kinds of mischief thousands of miles away, time zones away from Iran. But if more war between the United States and Iran would have been the answer, we would have found it sometime between 1953 and today. More war between the United States and Iran is not the answer. The only answer, the only answer is what foreign policy for America is about. It's diplomacy. And we had a diplomatic off-ramp where we were around the table with not only Iran, but with allies and adversaries, China and Russia, to control Iran's nuclear program. The deal was working according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. When President Trump became president, he wanted to tear it up. His own Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, and his own Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, told him, keep the deal. For God's sake, keep the deal. Use tools against other Iranian misbehavior, but stay in this deal because it's the off-ramp after 80 years of violence. And instead, for the first time that I'm aware of, the United States, with our seal of an eagle looking toward the olive branches of peace and not the arrows of war, the United States tore up a diplomatic deal that was working and walked away from the table. And many of us, Chris and Sheldon, we predicted, if you do this, if you make diplomacy impossible, you will make war inevitable. It's only a matter of time. And now here we are with 14 U.S. troops died, one, Robert Marzon of Spotsylvania County, Virginia, hundreds injured, $29 trillion in climbing being spent, people paying more at the pump because the United States, a diplomacy-loving nation, preferred war over diplomacy. The only answer to this that's a just answer and the right answer that will bring down tension and lead to something lasting is a diplomatic answer. And some believe that's impossible. Some believe that's impossible. Just like some, if they hear the biblical lesson that you'll beat swords into plowshares, they think that's impossible. Impossible? Look at our relationship with Japan right now. Impossible? Look at our relationship with Germany right now. If impossible, look at the fact that when we visit Vietnam, Chris, and we visitors are welcomed with such love and compassion, which speaks both to the magnanimity of nations we've been at war with, but also to a magnanimity that's deep within the spirit of Americans. Peace is possible, but not if we prefer war to peace. And so my hope tonight, and having organizations like Foreign Policy for America so steadfast about this, makes it a hope that is not just hope, but a confidence. I'm not so confident on the timing, but I am confident on the outcome. We will find a path toward peace. It will be a peace that will take a long time to build because trust takes a long time to build, but you can build it and you can beat a sword into a plowshare, and that's what you guys are about. Thanks so much for this award.